I don't know, rural part of England, felt right to bust the flat cap out again. Hey, I continue to work my way through commission reviews, and this one, I've now seen the Doctor Who Oddity that is K-9 and Company, a girl's best friend. So what this basically is, it's a pilot for a failed spin-off for K-9 and Sarah Jane Smith from Doctor Who. In the early 80s was when they tried to get this up and running. Now, it's especially interesting to go back and watch this in the world we currently live in, being one where Sarah Jane did eventually get her own spin-off that was successful enough to last for several seasons and would have lasted more had Elizabeth Sladen not very regrettably passed away. But it's odd to watch this thing and compare it at least a little to the Sarah Jane Adventures, because you look at the Sarah Jane Adventures and you see all the hooks, all the things that are going to keep you coming back. The idea that, Sarah Jane is kind of seeking out this weirdness. The stuff going on with Luke right off the bat. And you've got something you want to find out more answers about that. How's he going to integrate into the world? There's a lot of things to make you go, I want to keep seeing this. There's no hook, really, to K-9 and Company. There's a concept, there's a pitch, but there's no hook. The pitch is Sarah Jane and K-9 in modern day dealing with whatever. But that's kind of the thing, isn't it? They just stumble across it and deal with the immediate issue, and nothing about the setting seems to demand more from them. And I found myself going, what the heck would a next episode even look like? Just be them stumbling into something again? Yay. I mean, that works in Doctor Who because the very nature of the TARDIS and the Doctor's tendency to want to keep journeying and traveling makes it totally viable that he just keeps running into stuff. He doesn't stay put. He's going to keep wandering or whatever. But, she's on Earth now. And in England. And presumably the show would have stayed in England because, keep the budget down. So she's just going to keep wandering into stuff. Okay. And there really is no hook. And, there's no real interesting characters involved in this either. Honestly, the most interesting thing about this might be the opening credits. Partly for the absurd, on-the-nose corniness of the theme music.
K-9. K-9.
And just how few images there actually are that they just keep cutting between. And they'll cut back to Sarah in the same position 3 times, just slightly shifted a little differently. They clearly did not shoot enough to actually cobble together a decent opening sequence. And you can tell Elizabeth Sladen doesn't know what to do with this. I don't mean in the body of the episode itself. She does Sarah Jane about as well as she ever did. Honestly, she puts in the work. But for this opening credit sequence, she's standing there what am I doing here? Why is this my life? It's just the vibe. She seems most relaxed. She's got the wine in her hand. And I'm like, I feel you. I'd probably need a drink too if I was having to do this. So if you haven't seen it, I'm gonna kind of spoil it. It's not... Getting this spoiled is not gonna haunt you to your dying day, even if you're a Doctor Who completionist. And if you are a Doctor Who completionist, you've probably seen it already anyways. So the first thing to note is that Sarah Jane never met K-9. K-9 came around after she left the TARDIS. So he finds her because he is a gift from the Doctor, and he identifies himself as such, and Sarah Jane clicks into it just fine, and they start, having a little bit of a back and forth. They start, I guess, developing as much of a rapport as one can have with a tin dog, but so that has to get established. But then there's all these other characters. There's her aunt. There is her aunt's ward. There's these people in the town where her aunt lives, a bunch of whom practice dark magic. They stand around cauldron at night going, Hecate, Hecate, Hecate. Oh, boy. And, there's the neighbors, and there's the gardener, and there's the this and the that, and there's nothing interesting. And the editing on this is really weird. I kept losing track of time. Like, how long has it been since X happened? How quickly did this just happen? It keeps jumping forward in ways that I found really disorienting. Not so much that it actually made it impossible to follow, because the plot is actually very predictable, but I did find myself going like, wait a second. Like, because here's an early example. We have an early scene between Sarah Jane's aunt and her friend, her aunt's friend, talking about the fact that Sarah Jane's going to be coming up and visiting, and I think they even say like a few days, or they say a date or something, which presumably is far enough in the future that they're not just going to say tomorrow. And then the next scene jumps to Sarah Jane pulling up her car just directly up to that, not even like an establishing shot of her driving through the country so we get a sense of travel. It's just we see a car. We don't even know it's her car. A car pull up to a mansion. We don't even really know whose mansion that is. And she gets out and talks to somebody we've never seen. It's like, oh, I'm here to see my aunt. Well, your aunt's not here. She left for America already. Didn't you get a telegram or something? It just does this weird jump and puts two scenes together that don't have any real direct connective tissue, but also it's logically what's going to happen in the future, so you can still follow it, but it's weird and jarring, and that kind of thing happens a lot. And also in the reverse way, kind of, as well. What I mean by that is the example I just gave was like a big leap forward, and then later on, she kind of sorts out that, there's this coven in the town that's trying to do magic-y stuff, and she tells this guy who she, kind of trusts a bit in the town, and he gets on her side. He has a line that I really like where she's like, you believe me? He says, well, I have to, don't I? You just told me. But then, we get one cutaway, and then we come back, and he's going, well, nothing to be done tonight. We'll do it in the morning. I'm like, somebody's missing. Somebody's missing, and you suspect there might be a human sacrifice. And you're just like, well, I'm off to bed. So there's a weird jump to, just put the brakes on everything. It's weird. It's weird. It's the kind of mistakes that I think just show that this was being put together by a B team. And I don't mean to knock that. I don't know the history of work or how experienced any of the people involved in at any level, aside from Elizabeth Sladen and, John Leeson, who comes back to voice K-9. I don't know the resumes of any of these people. Maybe they were experienced, but these feel like the kind of errors that happen from people who just aren't your A team. They're not refined enough to recognize why jumping from this scene to this scene is jarring. Because on paper, well, this would follow this. What's the problem? But there's something that, especially with editing, there are things about editing that just comes down to rhythm. And you only get a sense of it as you do it, and as you do it more, and just feel it. It's like finding the beat in music. You just have to be immersed in enough to find that. And this feels like it was assembled by people who just hadn't found the rhythm yet. It's so weird. About the only thing that I can give it any kind of, and this is going to be a backhanded compliment, is it managed to avoid doing the twist that would have been the obvious twist in terms of who ends up being the priestess behind a mask, and it's not the super obvious person who we made it seem like it definitely was. Okay, so you're self-aware enough to realize that you would set it up to be obviously this person, but now it's not, except the person who it was. I'm like, who? Who's that again? There's a whole bunch of characters introduced. I had trouble keeping track of them, not because there's too many, but because they're boring and uninteresting. And her aunt's ward is... the name Wesley Crusher comes to mind. He's 17 or something, and he sees K-9 and he starts, saying all the inner workings. Oh, he must have this and this kind of inner circuitry and a holographic memory, or something like that. And K-9's correct, affirmative, and all those things. And I guess it's trying to establish that that this kid knows a lot, but for how far in the future K-9 is supposed to be from, that would be like somebody from the Victorian era, seeing an iPhone and knowing the base technology underneath it. I'm sorry, what? It just, again, like, I'm mostly complaining about it, I'm ragging on it, but because it's silly. But it's not silly enough to be camp, but it's just inept enough that silly is the only word that comes to mind. It's really easy to see why this did not get picked up. There's just not a lot going on, and the threat and the stakes are weird and nebulous, and honestly, if you happen to have any friends or family who partake in any version of witchcraft, they're going to watch this and go, oh dear God, when it comes to this coven. It's just weird. So I guess if you are a completionist and you haven't seen it, that's 45 minutes of your life you can sink into seeing why this spin-off didn't happen. I mean, that's basically it. It is a 45-minute long case for not allowing this to be a series. Again, not terrible, not atrocious. The acting is fine. The production values are fine. It's just not very good. It's just a whole lot of fine that adds up to a whole lot of nothing. K-9 and Company. Have you ever seen this thing? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. I mentioned the Patreon earlier. I'll mention it again and give you a link. That is how you can commission me to review stuff. And as I am finally starting to catch up on commission reviews, hopefully the wait time will get cut down on those. It's actually going to be my birthday next month. I think if I get this out when I'm planning to. March. My birthday's in March. And if you want to get me something nice, the Patreon, that'd be nice. But, even if you can't, like, share, subscribe. They all help me out. But no serious pressure on that. I take a relaxed attitude around here so you can just come on back next time you need a break. What am I doing?